Uh, Lenny Bakken says, when Savage won the title in 88, was Jeff or Jerry at all surprised by his very quick ascent to the top, considering only a few years prior he was in the Memphis territory?
My man Lenny, our man Lenny, good old Lenny. Look, that's two different questions. For me, I was mesmerized. I don't know about my dad, but I was just mesmerized that this is the same guy that was running up and down the roads to the territory in 88. You know, I'm in the business less than 2 years, and you know, Randy is sitting on top of the world. I was mesmerized. It's the most, I think, the best word. Surprised, kind of, but in all of it.
Matt wants to know, did you ever have a match with Randy where he scripted out the entire thing, as we've heard he used to do? Was that a part of the 6-man? Was he that detailed in that one, or is that not maybe a fair comparison?
This stage is all he wanted to know is Randy come in, kick ass, sleeper, come out of that, duck, sunset flip, pin me. Is that simple?
Enigmatic Vein says, not a question, but a thank you for bringing Randy back one more time. It turned out to be the end, but at least we got to see him a few more times on TV. I think we all agree with that. Thanks you, Jeff, one last time. I know I'm not booked. Terry says, what does Jeff know about the Dundee Poffo incident outside the gym? Is this one of the gun stories?
Yeah, yes, that's the Waffle House. Dutch tells a glowingly fascinating version of it. You know, I wasn't a firsthand witness and certainly wasn't working the territory. That was before I had started, but it is, it's legendary. That there were several run-ins. This gym that I believe they're talking about is right down here, Conrad, at the Rivergate Mall. It's what was the name of that? Oh gosh, Health. Oh, I'll think of the name of the gym after we get done. But yeah, again, Randy waiting on Bill to leave the gym. Crazy times.
Do you know what Randy thought of Jay Lethal's impression of him?
So, little footnote: Lanny and Jay were big buddies.
Yes,
and so Randy, I don't want to say he was over the top about it. That ain't Randy's style, but he was. He thought it was very cool. And you got to remember, probably to a nuisance part, wherever Randy went, people always wanted to impersonate him.
Yes.
And I mean, that just was a part of his everyday living and life and everything that went with it. But, you know, he understood that Jay Lethal was a huge fan of the Macho Man and Rick. I mean, that's part of Jay's fandom, but there wasn't any, there's not any story I got for you there. Just Randy thought it was a good one and he was respectful about it.
Francis Reyes wants to know, did Savage give you any good advice that helped you out in your personal life and or career?
To this day, when guys come up to me and they're not real sure, whatever it may be, and it's not just the wrestling business, you know, Randy was very adamant about, and this, you know, I'm going back to hearing my father talk about him and my grandmother and my grandfather and just kind of his business acumen and his entrepreneurial spirit. But Randy always had a mindset of stay in the game. And then, you know, his follow-up kind of principle that he always liked to talk about is don't jump without a net. And that's not jumping promotion to promotion. He's saying just be strategic in your business moves. And he probably learned some life lessons in ICW, and he probably jumped a few times without a net and probably took himself out of the game, and he figured out from Watts and others, you know, guidance, hey man, get back in the game and see what happens. And I, you know, on certain, no matter what kind of business deal, I'll think of those kind of things. You know, a few guys have told me, hey man, don't worry about how to get up in the air. Figure first thing you got to do is for today is try to figure out how you can actually just get up on the runway. You don't have to fly the plane yet. Get up on the runway. And that's kind of in simple terms, one day at a time. Figure out what you can do today to move your business initiative forward.
Here's a great question from Carlos Estrada. He says, if Randy were still with us today, does Jeff think he would have a job in creative or another part of the pro wrestling business? You know, the Macho podcast, the Macho cast, the Savage cast would be huge. But what do you think he'd be doing in wrestling today?
That's a good question, Carlos. My gut tells me, oh man, he like the legendary stories about Randy and his father. You know, his father, I think, did a gimmick as the miser, but they saved every penny. So Randy would be living on the beach. And I don't think he would want to be in the business day to day, but we'll kind of just play the tape forward and have a little fun with it. I mean, he'd be a hell of a VO artist, but I think there would be some kind of way that Randy would be monetizing his merchandise, his IP, if you will. Maybe a clothing line, maybe cologne. He would be merchandising because the Macho Man is so, man, it has so much testosterone in it, if you will. Somehow, some way, they would figure out how to create a licensing brand, a line of things. They could do this today because his IP is still being monetized.
Marty B wants to know, as fans, we all spend time debating what wrestlers' best matches were. Do you know what matches stood out to Randy that he thought was his best work?
I wish I did. I wish I did. You know, Randy, well, thought I had last night, I'll share it, is that coming into WCW, you know, Randy had the conversation with me, hey man, you're a bump taking heel, you know how to feed the comeback. That was kind of a staple that he loved for heels to make the baby faces look like Superman. And you know, he's like, yeah, you learned how to take bumps because Lawler gave him, you know, the reality is Lawler didn't make me take a lot of bumps, but just that whole mindset of making your opponent look great. And Randy did that through his whole career.
Justin Hannah wants to know, whose idea was it for Randy to pile drive Ricky Morton through that table?
Well, that's a good question. Lawler could maybe answer that. I have no idea whose idea it was, but man, that is a legendary clip, if you will, from Mid-South Coliseum.
We got a couple of questions about outlaw stuff. Mitchell wants to know, Jeff, I've always been a bit confused on the relationship between the CWA and ICW. ICW was an outlaw promotion in CWA's territory. So why did the CWA then allow ICW on CWA television? Could you talk us through a little bit more about the relationship and how it worked with the two rival promotions? I think we kind of did that.
We covered
I think the idea that this outlaw promotion term is something that people got really familiar with on Jim Cornette's podcast. Yeah. But it's not really applicable, I don't think, today the way it was back then.
No.
Friend of the show, Ed, says, were there any general views on outlaw promotions like the ICW? Were there cases when some were more acceptable by NWA promoters based on their footprint, maybe how often they ran, whether they had a television presence? I assume the wrestlers liked having more places to work, but could people be blackballed if they work for certain outlaw promotions? Please get 100% granular.
Well, I mean, gosh, it's such a different era, but the term outlaw, I think, and again, I'm not the authority on this because I'm the son of a promoter, and by the time I started, 86, but outlaw came from, usually they didn't have TV, and if they did have TV, it was low budget and they didn't have a lot of money. And because as soon as guys could get booked by territory promoters, their pay went up, they had more work. And it was just kind of these guys that were trying to give it a go on it. And you weren't blackballed. Now, if you did some things, Jack Pfeffer, there are other guys that would do certain things. And blackball, to me, that's a term that's really thrown around. And the reality is only a few people, I think, blackballed through the years, but even that, it's kind of like, how many times was Sid or Warrior blackballed from Vince? 15, and they came back 16. It's like you're blackballed until we need you. I mean, that's pretty much, I think that was always my understanding. But you know, the differentiation between an outlaw promotion and the territory is most of the time the territories were recognized by other territories and outlaws weren't.